I kind of owe my career to you, Paul. Thank you very much.
I get this.
Um,
Thank you very much, Dave. I get them regularly, so I appreciate it.
I consider myself first of all, I consider myself lucky because you hired me, but I also, looking back, careers go so many different directions. And I was lucky enough to be hired because I would have taken a job on anything. I was lucky enough to be hired by somebody who's was doing a good show. And so I learned on a good show. It does make a difference. Yes, I was a lawyer. This was, Paul, you did so, I mean, I know you kind of wanted to be in showbiz, so to speak, right from the time you were young. It never even occurred to me. I mean, literally, it was not a situation where it was like, oh, no, not even part of my thought processes. It just wasn't something on the radar as I grew up. I was going to go to college and I was going to be a professional of some sort. And it wasn't because I was beaten into that. I don't know. My parents did such an effective job of not opening my eyes. I don't know. Um, I just, that's what it was. And I didn't have a problem with it. I went to law school and couldn't stand law school, but I practiced law for several years. And one of my friends from law school had thought that, he did think of it. And he was planning on moving to LA, and he did move to LA and became a writer. And so I started thinking about it and started thinking about it and thought I had something to say. And so I got in my car and drove out here. And it really was that stupid, actually. I feel I need to clarify that because I thought about it. And then what I should have been doing was writing part-time, writing in the evenings, writing on weekends. And I didn't. I was just too exhausted. I was working hard. And I realized if I'm going to do this, I have to kind of throw myself in the deep end of the pool. And so without having really written a word,
Yeah.
I quit my job, got in my car, drove to LA, and then started trying to write.
I was exactly the same as I did. Isn't that funny? Because I didn't have a job to quit, not being a high school dropout. But other than having no career and then going to again have no career in Hollywood, I did the same. But you gave up something. I mean, they must have been earning some decent money at that point. So even as a beginning attorney, you've been.
I was a partner in the firm.
Oh my God.
It was a small firm, and so they made me a partner because it was cheaper than keeping on giving me raises. And yeah, I was doing pretty well, or what I thought was well. I have since learned I was making nothing.
TV money. There you go. Yes, unlike us folks who in independent film. Yeah, it's fascinating. So you came and you were in LA because I found you in Canada, but you were in LA and you were struggling. Were you taking writing courses? What did you do?
No, I didn't do any of that. I read scripts. I read a lot of scripts and tried to write scripts and wrote script after script after script. And I wrote one feature spec script, and then I basically just wrote, yeah, and I wrote a bunch of TV spec scripts, half hours mainly, and just tried to get better and tried to get better on my own. I really, for whatever reason, I made a decision then that I did not want to take any, I did not want to be told on page 12, this has to happen. That was my perception of what a class would have been, that on page 12, this has to happen and you have to do this. And I felt I would get trapped. I think it obviously worked out, but I do think I was wrong in that sense. I think I simply ultimately, after years of trial and error, kind of stumbled upon the same basic rules and the same basic shape of what you need to do with your characters and with your story. And maybe I needed to do it my way. Maybe I needed to do it more slowly, but that's what I did and kind of worked out.
Oh well, yeah, certainly did, certainly did. Now, and so we're going to hop over that. So you came, we did a couple of shows together, and then you left, and by that time you were an executive producer of a television show. It was a decent show, but it was nothing that was going to light up the television world. talk about when you left there, because there was a huge leap that happened just in a couple of years from where you went to what happened next. Talk about sort of that transition.
Well, first of all, I apologize if you're hearing my lawnmower. I'm trying to somebody outside, so I hope the sound not messing with the sound. But
It's
yeah,
mine. They're just out there. It's the guy mowing the hay. Exactly.
that's yeah. I'm just rubbing in your face that there's grass here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, David.
I did kind of, to the extent there's a traditional course of a career to take in Hollywood. For the first several years, I just rose my way up through the ranks. I started in Canada. And I took a big jump because Due South was such a huge thing in Canada. I took a big jump in Canada, did another show. But then I went back and kind of went, executive story editor, co-producer, producer. I moved my way up fairly quickly, but then you gave me the break. But then, yeah, I was running family law with Stephen Nathan for a couple of years, and was thrilled. But I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it, and I really thought this was kind of cool. But in the back of my mind, it was cool. I wanted to do my own show, and that was my plan after family law, was to create my own show for the first time. I never wrote House was the first pilot I ever wrote.
Oh my God.
I took my sweet old time about it. And then, so basically over the 2 years after that, I took one misstep there that did not work out in the interim. But basically the idea was I'm going to write my own show. And I wrote my own shomy and I have since learned how I had such a blissful experience through that, my experiences since then in creating shows have not gone as smoothly as that one did. It was bizarre. It was everything.
How did it happen? How did it happen? You had a deal at a studio at that point?
I had a deal at Universal. It was I was teamed up with Paul Atanasio and Katie Jacobs as my producing partners. I didn't fully understand what that meant at the time even. And what it meant was we were bandying about series ideas. And Paul, in fairness, had this idea of just a medical mystery show. That was it. That was literally the extent of the idea, doing a show that's a medical mystery show. And I wasn't crazy about the idea for reasons I'll explain. But basically, I just, here, I'll tell you what happened. Paul, because Paul Atanasio was a big shot in the community, was out for dinner one night, because that's what you used to do. And he ran into the president of ABC, because that was his world. And he said to her, I'm doing this thing with David Shore. It's a great idea. It's Law and Order in a hospital. It's CSI where the germs are the suspects. And that was it. That was the pitch. I mean, now you usually go in with and she said, I love it. Don't pitch it anywhere else.
Wow.
But we did. We went and pitched it. But that was the extent of the idea at that point in time. And I'm going, oh God, I was mortified because it was not the show I wanted to do. There was no show at that point in time. I did not want to do CSI where the germs are the or Law and Order where the germs are the suspects. I think I might have that backwards. It's Law and Order where the germs are the suspects and CSI in a hospital. Because, people talk about whodunits. And that was the other part of it. It's not a whodunit, it's a whatdunit. He had all these really clever ways of selling it, and he succeeded, and so
yeah.
What's that?
Yes, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it's amazing. I've got a network show all of a sudden, but I don't really like the network show. And the reason after some thought, people don't, people talk about whodunits and they talk about whatdunits apparently, but people don't watch whodunit. You don't watch the Butler did it. you don't care that the butler did it. You care why the butler did it.
Mm-hmm.
It's always it's not a who done it, it's a why done it. And germs don't have motives. Germs don't, kill you because, some germ in your spleen doesn't frame the liver because the liver is having an affair with, that's not the way germs work. They just do what they're doing, which to me which is great for a movie of the week or something like that, or a movie where just it's a big disaster and we save the day. But so I had a series, but I had to
wisely passed on it because it made no sense to you and you went on to do something else. That's great. Yeah, no.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Exactly. So I did the cowardly thing and got on the phone and pitched this stupid idea. And then I spent months and months trying to figure out how to make it a show I wanted to do, which was basically, so everything got delivered late, but once it was delivered, everything was good. Everything got.
How did you figure it out from there? I mean, because that's a huge thing. I mean, it's a great pitch. I'm a terrible pitch man. I could never have come up with that pitch, but it's a great pitch in that it only makes enough sense to be catchy and almost impossible to create. But it's a great pitch. I can't do that. But you went from that somehow, and this thing that you thought was incredibly stupid, over the months to coming up with fucking brilliant. Sorry the language, but a pretty damn brilliant pilot. How?
Thank you very much. It was largely turning it inward and trying to figure out it was about character. It was who's behind this, who's at the root of this. I did not want to do, Marcus Welby. And so it was turning it on its head. What if the doctor just doesn't care about the patients? What if he cares about the answers? He's not evil per se, but he just cares about answers. He doesn't care about people. He's looking for objective truth, which is a thing I find fascinating. We all look at the world through our own lens. It's not even rose-colored glasses. We look at the world through our own lens. We all have distorted views of what's reality. And I thought that this is just a great place to put that character. And so I just started putting more and more stuff into it. Sherlock Holmes is in there. Myself is in there to a great extent, which I think, that's kind of what I do. I write one character pretty well.
Sorry about this. We're having a little microphone problems. I'm having James step in to see. No, I'm not sure if it's on or not, James. I just don't know if it's that. I don't know how to. This is my son, James. Say hi, everybody.
Hello.
Yes.
Hey, James, it's good seeing you again. I'll tell you one other story that went into it, something that happened to me before I ever moved out here. I hurt my hip doing something.
Okay. And the microphone is working. I know that you're very concerned, David. So my microphone is in fact working, so we can get back to you. I'm sorry. But now I can't find you. Where'd you go? Oh my God, James, he's disappeared.
I'm here. I see myself.
No, but there's David. Sure. Good. I'm sorry. So you were saying you hurt your hip.
Yeah. So I made an appointment with the doctors, and because it was Canada, it was 6 weeks till I got the appointment, by which point my hip was completely healthy. But for some reason, I just went in anyways. And it was a teaching hospital. And so 5 or 6 different young doctors examined my completely healthy hip. Yes. And reassured me that my completely healthy hip was a completely healthy hip. And all I'm thinking during that whole time is, wow, I'm wasting a lot of time for a lot of really smart people who could be doing a lot better stuff. They should be telling me, they should be mocking me. They objectively should be calling me an idiot, because I was. And I knew, and I remember the door in the room, and I remember them leaving. And I remember thinking, as soon as they're out that door, I know they're making fun of me, because they should be. And I thought it would be fun to have a character who didn't wait till he left the room to call the idiots idiots.
Brilliant. Okay, so out of that real life, that research you did, not research, which is often how I do research. You stumble upon something.
Yes.
That's how the character house was created. And so you had that. You had a character. what'd you do next?
Well, it was also how do I structure these mysteries, and it was also again about character. The show is about medical mysteries, but I think if you look, you know, we did a lot of episodes. I think if you watch those episodes, it was rarely solved, if ever. I hope never, by just they do a test and they discover the answer. Mm-hmm. The test would always confirm the answer, and the answer would almost always not come by, oh, this symptom and that symptom equals this. Mm-hmm. There would be something about the patient. It was never, and by the patient, I mean not their symptoms, I mean their personality. Yes. And their quirks and their flaws. House will see some flaw which would lead him to conclude something about that character, which would lead him to the diagnosis. The diagnosis is always about the human being. And by the human being, I don't mean the biology of the human being, I mean the personality of the human being. It was always something like that that led to the answer, which is, you know, the saying, and I watched a little bit of your Bo, I watched a lot of your Bo interview last night, and I thought it was great, but you talked about everybody lies. And that was kind of the catchphrase of the series. And it was in there in the pilot. It was the name of the episode of the pilot, Everybody Lies. Oh. And it is what you described when you talked about it in that last one. So watch that other one if you haven't watched that. It's not about nefarious purposes. It's just everybody has a distorted view of things. And everybody, which also was something I got, if you will, from the research. That was something I got. That was where my legal background kind of came in handy, in the sense that I remember one thing that happened. I'm just rambling, but
no, you're not. This is fascinating. It's not rambling at all.
I'm being modest. I know this is all brilliant. It's just, but it's my way of dealing with it.
Exactly. Yes.
Very early in my legal career, guy comes into my office, tells me this horror story of his relationship with his business partner. And I go, holy mackerel, we got to sue this guy. We got to take this guy to court, and we're going to nail him. And that's horrible. What a horrible story. And then I get to court, and his business partner testifies. And I realized, had the business partner walked into my office and told me his story, I would have had the exact same reaction on my end of, let's go nail that bastard. And I also realized neither of them thought they were lying.
Yeah.
You know, they both completely believe their story. No one does. No one does.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you've got months here. So I want you to walk me through it a little more. So you've got House, you've got your character, you've got some research, some basic research, and that you kind of know at this point that it's how you're going to structure things. It's going to be one episode. You're going to try and solve it in one episode, because that's what at the time had to be done. I tried earlier to do something that was different. It's something called Easy Streets a couple of years before that, and it just blew up because you didn't do continuing stories, and I got reprimanded for doing this. So we had to do it, but you have to do it in a way.
I know how you respond to being reprimanded.
We had to do it in a way that the story, the arc doesn't feel rushed. It has to come out at not a leisurely pace, certainly, because there are real stakes here. People, it's life and death, but it has to come out in kind of a natural way. What else? How did you, I mean, there's a long way from that to a script or a story.
There is. Well, the challenge with House was you had to have this compelling medical mystery at its core, which never really interested me, but I knew I needed it. I knew I needed it. And so I did the research and did the work.
How'd you do the research?
I met with doctors. And just kept asking them questions. It never, and this is writer's point of view, you know, like I'm sure the doctors that consulted on House thought they came up with the stories. They didn't. I mean, they were invaluable, but the process was almost always, I'd like this to happen.
Right.
You know, I'd like House to be confronted with this type of situation. Right. How can we do that medically? And they'd go, you can't. And then I'd rephrase the question, and I kept rephrasing the question until I got the answer I wanted.
Exactly. So you knew what the plot structure had to be. And then
Yes.
you were looking for the widget. You were looking for the answer in this puzzle, which the researchers didn't want to give you because what you were saying didn't quite make sense, although dramatically it made perfect sense and was the only thing you needed. That's exactly what you needed and you knew it. So you just kept asking and reframing that question. Now, where did you find these doctors? Did you I mean, were these brilliant doctors? Were these they were doctors in the hospital? Where did you find them?
To be honest, the main one was a friend, you know, who I get together with and pick his brain. Eventually, on the series itself,
Yeah,
we had multiple doctors. The
the
pilot was just,
pilot. Yeah, the pilot.
the pilot was just a friend, and then I did meet with the head of infectious diseases here in LA, which was fascinating. I'm not sure how helpful it ultimately was, but it was fascinating because I didn't want to go that way ultimately. You know,
but you see, you found something that was unsolvable because one of the, I mean, Corey Mandel, who I like a lot as a writing teacher, recently said that, you know, what the how you frame a story is you come up with a character who has a goal and then ask, why is that impossible? And as soon as you know why it's impossible, you know you have an idea that you can actually go for it. Now, then you have to figure out why it's not impossible, how this person overcomes the impossible every single time. And I can't think of a better paradigm than that, than your show, because every time it was like, oh, well, that's impossible. No one can figure that out. That's impossible. So did you come up with the answer first and then figure out why it was impossible? Or did you, because every week it was like this.
Yeah, you also have, I mean, built into that question is you have a character who does surprising things, yeah. and the audience is expecting them to do surprising things, which makes it all the more impossible to surprise them.
Yes.
What stupid thing is he going to do now? Because you need your character in a show like that, I think always, to have an insight that nobody else had. Right. And yet as soon as they give it, everybody watching goes, oh yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, and I guess it's helped by the medicine, because to me it's a magic trick. I think the paradigm is exactly like sleight of hand.
Yeah.
Where I'm going, look at the medicine, look at the medicine. Look at the crazy medicine. And then really what's going on is my characters are having insights into each other and into humanity in the midst of that.
Right.
You ask an interesting question I'm not sure I have an answer to. I know I needed the medical stuff and the personal stuff. I know I needed both of them before I had a story. I would every now and again have a writer come to me with a great medical idea, but it's not an episode until I know what the personal arc is for the guest cast and for our characters, what it allows us to bring out in our characters. And then every now and again, we'd have an interesting idea for a character, but we don't have a story until we have this medical stuff.
And how did you link it in the pilot? Just go back to the pilot, because how did you find that? Because that's what I'm really interested in, because from that point, you know, you had the struggle of how to do it over and over again. And that's almost impossible, as you and I both know. You're just doing it no, I can do it once. That's why I like movies. You just get to do it once. You know? Well, we have to do it every week. It's insane.
Yeah. I remember at one point, first of all, I should add to some of the stories about the process, because it was interesting. Yeah. Yes, I had exactly what you just described, but 2/3 of the way, I think before we started shooting the pilot, I think before I delivered the script, I said to Paul Ignacio, I think I've got one really good medical story here. I'm not sure there's a second one.
It's exactly what they want to hear.
Well, and Paul said you only need one at this point.
Yeah. Wow.
And he was right. And luckily luckily for me, and unfortunately for humanity, there are apparently many, many ways for the human body to break down. Yeah. So, but it was a challenge, and you know, we went to the lupus well a lot. No, there was never lupus. I'll tell you this much in the terms of the process.
Yeah.
And this is unheard of for the pilot. So I spent those months, and during those months, I developed that character mean, it's literally like, I think it got pitched very beginning of August.
Mm-hmm.
By Thanksgiving, I had an outline, but which was late. I hadn't delivered it. It might have been, no, it was after that. It was really kind of after that. And I said again to Paul, I said, I'm worried about this outline because they thought they bought the next Law and Order. You know, they thought they bought a very just this kind of standard TV show, you know. Yeah. And I think this is very much a character study, and I don't think they're going to like it. Mm-hmm. And Paul's biggest contribution to the story, to the success of the series, happened then, which was he said, I'm going to phone them up and tell them you've got a good outline, and they're not going to see it. That wow. Which just doesn't happen in network TV. Wow. And he believed that, he believed rightly that they would like the script more than they like the outline. That
wow. Yes, always. An outline is a terrible thing to share with anyone. It's very important to have, but it's I mean, every writer needs an outline. But if I shared my outlines, or if some of the things we were working on, if we shared those outlines, they go, but why does this? They're written for us.
Yeah.
And the more they're written for someone to read, the worse the end result is going to be, because you have to say things that you want to say that you want to say subtext in text, and it's
I completely agree. And I reached a point on both my shows. It wasn't right away, but I reached where I don't deliver outlines in network studio. Yeah. They all the executives say we know how to read outlines. They don't. They don't.
No one does. It's not their fault. No one does. I don't know how to read outlines. Not yours. Right. Because it's your mind. It's the process of your mind, and you fill in so many things in there. If you're lucky, you have someone to do that.
Sorry, network shows are so tough to do. It is so tough to deliver 20 plus episodes of a TV show in a season. It's insane. Yeah. It really is kind of insane. And then when you build into that, what was happening when I had to deliver an outline was I would get an outline to shape where I go, okay, I know this is going to be a good episode. And then I would spend a couple days shaping that outline so that the network and studio would read it and go, yeah, go ahead, as opposed to sending it as it was and having them ask me 1,000 questions and raise a lot of problems and possibly saying, no, we don't want you to do this.
Yeah, I never did them. We never did them. I got them for myself, not never, but mostly never did them. I just said, no, I don't do that. And they went, oh, okay. But these people do want control, because and rightly so, but you can't have control on that level. You just can't. I mean, I'm very lucky. I have a couple of people I work with, Michael Nozick, my daughter Alyssa, who both know story and can read my outlines and can contribute. But and if I have to do something that for a feature or for a Bible for a series, and we just did one recently, you spend a lot of time just polishing that, just making it readable and exciting, and it's a lot of work. When in fact you can go straight to script if you have the story. But okay, let's go back. You're skipping over. I want to know the nuts and bolts. Okay, you got your main character, you got some research.
So I actually, again, so I'm more or less there, but I'm obviously not there. I remember I actually did the writing of this thing. So I'm late at this point. The schedule is you're supposed to deliver the outline by Thanksgiving. We never did deliver it. Supposed to deliver your script, I think, sometime mid-December. I hadn't written a word by mid-December. I was still mulling on it and stewing on it. And then I remember very well, I was visiting my mom and dad at their condo in Florida with my family over the Christmas break. And I'm way overdue. And so I'm going to the pool with my kids, my little kids, and then coming back and then going back to the condo for a minute. I'd go back to the condo, write for 15 minutes or half an hour, and then go back, not be a horrible, hang out with my mom and dad, and then go back and write a little more. And over my week, I wrote the whole thing during the week like that.
Wow.
And the reason I was able to do that, obviously, at that point, that's not my style. Some people may be able to. It had permeated. I knew what it was at that point. And it was almost in the nature of just transcribing all the moments I wanted at that point. And
Then we have
Doctor
to,
who doesn't want a patient, doctor who hates the patient meets the patient wants to die, the doctor, you know,
yeah.
it's,
And so taking a step back, long before your outline, did you get that, James? Thanks so much. My door. This is what they sound like in New York. Exactly.
this is, yeah.
Yes. So you have your concept, you have your central character, you've done some research, you kind of know that the kind of mystery you want to tell. Did you then people that? Did you find other characters? How did you get from that point to your outline in fleshing out what this series is going to be?
Well, at that point, by the time the outline was around, I knew.
I mean, sorry, no, period out. Just way back.
It was obviously a large extent about that main character, and I also.
Where did you? Which was the second character you created?
That's a really good question. They all kind of served a role, and it was like, what does this person need? It became a big deal in the middle of season 1 that the network wanted a nemesis for this character. In the middle of season 1, they asked me to bring in a nemesis. I guess this is when our ratings weren't that good, and this is not answering your question, but sort of is, because and so they brought in this guy who wants to destroy House, the rebel, and we need that conflict, they said. And I thought that was a terrible, and I fought it, and it's a longer story than we have time for here, but because I spent a lot of time thinking about what Dr. House would need in a boss, what Dr. House would need in a friend, and what Dr. House would need in the people who are working for him.
So that in fact was your prep work. That's what's before you out. You thought, okay, what does he need?
Yeah.
And when you asked what did he need, what did you mean?
Who would be his friend? That was actually like not just like it's not like what serves the purpose, but who would be his friend? Who would be his boss? The boss one is kind of indicative because that's where it became very apparent in the middle when they said bring in a nemesis. And nemesis is just a stupid idea for this character because either they're going to fail or they're going to succeed. If somebody wants to shut Dr. House down, then they succeed in shutting him down and we don't have a show, or they fail and they're idiots because he's right, you know? And so they would be Colonel Clink, which is not.
I don't know, Dr. House, unemployed doctor, could have been a spinoff, you know, it just sits there going to unemployment.
Well, either way, it's terrible, you know? If he defeats them every time, it's just Colonel Clink. And if they defeat him, there's no show.
Right.
And so what I knew he needed, and when I say he needed, I'm talking about dramatic opportunities, I think, more than I'm talking about his soul, although it became that. Somebody who recognized his value, recognized his strengths and his weaknesses is what he needed above him. If it's somebody who just sees one or the other, it's a problem. And so it had to be somebody, I knew House was crazy enough and out there enough that it had to be somebody who would take a chance on him, and that chance is blowing up in their face. And so although they're the one telling him not to do this, not to do that, they're also the only reason that he's employed, which I found an interesting.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, so that was so you found a friend, you found a boss.
I'll tell you a funny story about the friend, since it's been so much time has passed, I can tell in terms of the casting. So Robert Sean Leonard comes in and auditions and does a very nice job. And we ultimately cast him, but he auditions. I don't know if you remember that. You must. The process used to be you would literally bring the actors in to the network.
Yes.
And they sit in a little amphitheater and read their part. And then they'd leave the room. And then the president of the network would go, well, I don't know, you know, maybe this. And the president, that's what happened. And the president says, well, I think he should be a little kinder, a little more soulful. I can't remember what the note was exactly. And our director goes, okay, I'll go talk to him. And I'm sitting there in the room going, I think that was a terrible note. I mean, I think the best friend can't be like House, but has to be somebody that inside them has an attraction to that kind of insanity.
Yes.
and needs that kind of insanity and values that kind. There's something fucked up inside Wilson in order for Wilson to be House's friend, and I'm thinking that, and I'm thinking that, and I'm thinking, do I say something? Do I say something? Then I go, I gotta say something. So I get up, leave the room, I remember walking down the hallway in the network, finding Robert with our director, and I go, Brian, and he immediately goes, oh, it's a terrible note. It's a terrible note.
Brian
We'll
says
do it their way. We'll do it their way for the audition. We'll cast them, and then we'll do it our way.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh God. And so he did. He came back in and he was incredibly empathetic and loving and caring, and they went, great. And then you cast him and did what you wanted. Okay.
Yes.
Brilliant. How often, just for the actors in the audience who are listening here, how often does an actor walk in and give you exactly what you want, and you go, great, versus an actor walked in and just is wrong, and then you go, but there's something there. What is that? And then you dig in. How does that work with you?
The latter doesn't happen too often, at least as the series is going on, and not because it should, just because there's not the time for that as the series goes on. Mm-hmm. That does happen. It does happen sometimes. It happens regularly. Going, they're wrong about that, but boy, they're right about this. Boy, they found something really interesting there. You do want to get noticed in your audition. You want to, you want to make some choice where they go, ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so some choice that's not obvious.
Yeah, yeah. Having said that, if you're reading for the second orderly, do the obvious choice,
Yes, sir, I'll get those done right away. Yes, exactly. Yes, you sort of have to bring what's expected, which is the frustration of many actors and many of my actor friends who do one guest shot after another, and their job is to deliver the water from here to there, and that's their job. And yet, as folks who are doing this, we want, when they're bringing the water from here to there, we do want something. We want them to be human beings. We want them to do a little surprising. And often we haven't written it. Often all we've written is the exposition. So when someone does that and you go, oh, it's good. They didn't interrupt the script. They didn't play against the story, but they gave me a little something there. That's interesting. Yeah. Not too much to stop the script.
No,
it's not the story.
It's dangerous. It's a really tricky, dangerous thing.
Yeah. Because the other thing is you came in, you do exactly what they say, you nail the part, and so much so that they love you and bring you back, and for orderly number 2, because you need orderly number 2 every week, and suddenly orderly number 2 becomes a recurring character, and suddenly then he has a character, but yeah, both are risky, just doing what you want and not the when you're casting for the pilot.
Yeah.
What are you looking for in those actors who come in? Now, you've written this, and writers can be terrible in this, because we write something, we've pictured the character in our head, and we want the character to walk in the room and just say the goddamn lines and then leave. And then we go, great, that's it. That was the first person who came in, did it, leave. Do you fall into that problem yourself? Do you find, and do people stop you, or are you looking for someone to surprise you a little bit?
I confess I'm more the former than that I've got a
vision. Yeah,
I've got a vision in my head, not physical stuff, but just the attitude that comes across from the lines, the point of view. I will get surprised sometimes. I'm very excited about the surprises, but usually it's like, no, that's
you want them to understand, because often we don't write parentheticals. You don't write those little descriptions each time that says, this is how the line should be said, because it's stupid to do that and to feed actors. But you want them to understand that when they say, I hate you, Dr. House, that they truly mean, I love you, Dr. House. They do, and you want that to be underneath. And when the actor just comes with that, I hate you, it's like, no, it's wrong, obviously. Do you find yourself directing them a lot when you're doing, I'm talking not week to week, I'm talking for the series, or the pilot rather.
Yeah, the pilot, I mean, you need a director who understands all that.
Yeah.
And you, like, I do extensive tone meetings with the directors, and this is week to week, but it's amazing the stuff you see on the page and you think is so obvious to you isn't so obvious to other people.
No.
And there's 10,000 things that they can go a different direction on.
Yeah.
And one or two of them are brilliant, but a lot of them aren't, and are losing something that you want, because this scene is here to set up that scene. You know, this scene needs to stand on its own, but it's part of a whole story.
So interesting, just the fact that some characters have to drive the scene, and then you'll go down to the stage and you'll be watching that character sit back and go, I don't know, well, maybe this, and
yes,
just to drive the scene, push it forward. Yeah.
I did one scene a few years ago. I wasn't directing it, but I was there, and the actors, was driving, doing exactly what you described, and the actor made a choice to have his hands in his pockets.
Mm-hmm.
And I just asked the director to have him take his hands out of his pockets, and everything changed. Everything changed. The way he was approaching it just suddenly changed. He was just, he was pumped. He was excited.
So it changed for the better.
Yes, it changed much better. It became great.
Have you done that and messed them up? Have you done that?
Yeah.
Yes, we all do.
Yeah, I have gone and said, yeah, forget that note I gave you before. Is that possible?
Can you just put it out of your mind? Go back to what you're doing before, which was brilliant, before I messed it up. Wow, yeah. Very cool. I
should say you reminded me of something that Paul Haggis said to me many years ago, which I've quoted you on many times in terms of writing. It's not directly on point, but I feel I have to say it because I really try and live by this. You said if a scene advances the plot, it's a good scene, and if a scene tells you something about the characters, it's a good scene. And if it does both, it's a great scene, and you should be striving for both every single time. Mm. And do you remember saying?
No idea. No, I no, I don't remember any advice I give. So no, none. But I'm glad. I'm sure I read that somewhere and then passed it on to you. Yeah. Wow, interesting. Yeah, it's truth. You can't just. Yeah, if it just advances the plot, it's good. It's functional. But if it advances character too, or it makes you think, by doing that, isn't he going to sell his soul by winning? Then suddenly, yeah, you've got to see.
Yes.
Yeah. Very cool.
I will say this in terms of, we had a tough time casting House. I feel I should add this if people are going to watch it. It's become very old. Actually casting Dr. House. We read a lot of people. We had offers out to people, and it was to the point where you watch audition after audition after audition. I reached a point where I was starting to doubt the quality of my own writing. I was starting to go, did I write something? You try and write conflicting character traits within somebody. We're all a mass of contradictions, and you try and write that, and you try and show that, and then I thought I had done the equivalent of writing the actor is tall and yet short. Mm-hmm. I can type that, an actor can't deliver that. And I was starting to wonder whether I'd done the equivalent of that, because an actor would come in and be very funny, but that would be it. And then an actor would come in and they get the pathos of it, but wouldn't be amusing.
Right, yeah.
Or they were just wearing it, obviously. And then Hugh Laurie put himself on tape, and it was remarkable.
Put himself on tape? Of course he did, because he's mostly a comedy guy at that point.
Yes.
He was known for brilliant piece. I mean, I loved the stuff he'd done early on.
Me too.
Fry and Laurie. I mean, it was just brilliant. I would live to watch that. But a big step from that to House.
Yeah, no, huge. I actually, when I heard he was putting himself on tape, I went, oh, I know that guy. I'm a huge fan, but the Americans didn't know him. Yeah. Most of them. And he's a comedy guy. And I thought, ooh, maybe I'll get to meet him. But I never for a moment thought he could do it. Really.
Yeah. No, brilliant actor. Wow.
And then brilliant.
It teaches you something about humility, which we go over and over again, which I had a lesson I have to learn constantly. But also for actors is that, sometimes you just, doesn't matter how big you get, you got to pitch yourself. You got to put yourself out there. And he did. He went on tape, put himself on tape and sent it. He didn't even ask to you to fly over and meet him. Didn't say, I'll fly in if you pay me, and then I'll do audition in person. It's the only way I'll do it. No, he put himself on tape and obviously impressed the hell out of you.
Yeah. There's so many cautionary tales in TV, and that you have little control over a lot of it, but it is so important. I'm talked about you and the director being on the same page, particularly for a TV series. You and your star, you and your network. Boy, I've had this not happen, but you have to be. I've had a network wanting to do a completely different series than I was doing, as it turned out, and I didn't last very long on that. And you and your star need to see the character the same way, need to see the show the same way, or you are just doomed. No matter how brilliant the idea is, you are doomed.
I've been there with not just the star, but with the secondary character. We just didn't see it, and it was very, very difficult every week to try and get them to understand the character. In a movie that you can do that. I mean, I had that same problem in The Valley of Ella with Tommy Lee Jones. He saw a totally different character than I saw. I remember talking to him, and I sat down with him just before we had no rehearsal time. But he's Tommy Lee Jones. He's brilliant. He's going to do a great job, right? So I sat down with him. This is a Friday. We start shooting on a Monday. And this is my rehearsal process. I say, Tommy, how do you see this character? How do you want to play him? And he said, I see him as stupid and plan to play him as such. I went, my movie just disappeared. I have a stupid protagonist. And so I said, oh, Jesus, how do I think fast? I went, Tommy, I don't think he's stupid. I think he's very smart. I think he's a smart man who is blinded by pride, and therefore the result is stupidity. And he said, I'll play him any damn way you want. And that's Tommy Lee. And so every day he'd come to the set playing this character as stupid, every single scene, as a yokel. And he couldn't be. He had to be the guy who was going to save us, who was going to pull us through, and then be betrayed by his own pride because he couldn't see what was right in front of him. And so take after take, I just sort of slowly nudge him, as much as you can nudge Tommy Lee Jones, just slowly, getting smarter and smarter. And then around take 6, 7, suddenly, he'd just be brilliant. And you go, great, thanks. Out. And you go, you take too many takes. I said, no, Tommy, I take just enough.
he never saw that process, it sounds like. Not
until after. And then he went, oh yeah, you did it. But even afterwards, when he talked about me, he's, Haggis, he's a good director. He does too many takes, but never. Sometimes I do 22, 25 takes, not just on him, on others. Sometimes I do one. But if they give you what you need, you stop. You don't need a safety. And until they do, it's very, very, so yes, having a director on the wrong page is tough. Now, I was planning on covering a lot more, and we haven't. So at this point, I'd like to ask two things. One, would you come back with me again and talk about The Good Doctor and other things, first of all? And two, I'm assuming you're going to say yes. And two, can we go to some questions from that, because Federica has a bunch of questions. And,
sure.
My question for you is this. When you have a character that's unlikable or unrelatable, how do you still make him or her compelling?
I think in a weird way, your question answers itself. Networks and series often ask for likable characters. Their definition of a likable character is very different than mine, and I suspect very different from virtually all writers. Their definition is good. If he's good, he's likable. He or she is good. He or she is likable, and that is not the case. It's about making the character compelling. If they're compelling, you will like to watch the character, which is what you want. You want people to like to watch the character. You threw in the word relatable there too. I think if they're not relatable, I think that's really difficult. Having said that, any fully dimensionalized human being is going to be relatable, I think, on some level. I think that is one of the purposes of TV, actually, is you see it very much, I pride myself in thinking this on The Good Doctor, is We aren't so different after all. You know, once you meet somebody and get to know somebody in real life or by watching a TV show, if they're a real person and a decent person, you know, even if they're very different from you from different experiences, you realize that your commonalities are much greater than your differences.
Right. Right.
It's about stories being worth telling, because I guess reading a lot of scripts, you come across stories that have been told before that feel like they're not worth telling. But how do you as authors decide what stories will be worth the next year of your lives?
Well, in my case, it's never the next year of my life. It's, you know, I mean, it is in the sense of the big picture, you know, this year, it's multiple years of my life in that sense. The individual stories within episodes isn't. First of all, you quite often, you know, you not that often, but every now and again you pitch a story and the networker goes, oh, Grey's Anatomy did something like that. And generally that doesn't stop me or slow me down even, because I know I'm going to tell the story differently because I have a different point of view than they do. And I have different characters. And so I have different people experiencing perhaps a similar event, but there's something different coming out of it. I do very much ask myself, is this story worth telling? That's the most fundamental question I ask, is why am I telling this story? I don't always have a good answer, but every single episode, it's why are we telling this story? And what do I want to discuss? It's never I do not want to preach. I have no interest in preaching. I don't think there's any point in that. It's about exploring different points of view. You know, it's the Joe Biden thing of it all. I used to have an exercise I would give my writers along these lines, because I find so many writers, they fall into a trap of just, they've got their hero and they've got a nemesis who's just not what Paul just described. The nemesis is just a bad guy, and a bad guy is just not interesting. A bad guy who thinks he's doing something good is interesting, and he's got reasons for that. So my assignment I would give my writers was once a week. This is on family law. I think I started doing this. I would have them write one paragraph on a topic, any topic. Didn't have to inspire a story or anything, any topic at all. Just one paragraph about what they believe about that topic. It could be something serious. It could be the death penalty. It could be abortion. Could be, you know, handshaking.
Yeah.
And then I would have them write a second paragraph, which had to be from the point of view of somebody who fundamentally disagreed with them. And the idea was I shouldn't be able to tell which side they're on. And so I think opening your eye, I don't know how I got on this thing, but
that's a great idea.
Yeah, thank you.
It's I mean, and I think, as you were saying, a good idea doesn't have to be a new idea. How often do we hit new ideas? Almost never. It's a new way to approach an old idea, something that's been done many, many times. But I mean, due south was that. All these things we've done have done that. How many doctor shows that yes. could have said exactly like you have been done? And just as your reaction was when we brought you A Medical Mystery, you know, Quincy, please, it's been done 1,000 times. Why would I do this? Well, because you're going to look at it through your own lens. And that's any story is like that. So we shouldn't just, it's paralyzing. I talked about this with my son. It's paralyzing to say, I have to come up with a brand new idea, because you're never going to come up with a brand new idea. It's absolutely impossible. A good idea through your lens is what we're looking for.
I've got a question, sort of relates to The Good Doctor more than House. There's sort of a disclaimer at the beginning of the show that it's based on a Korean program. And do you actively keep up with the popular TV series or what's happening in foreign countries and wonder, would that work in America? Could I write that?
I don't actively keep up with them. There's so many good shows all around the world. It's remarkable. and but I don't. Multiple people sent me this series, said, "Hey, I think you'd like this show," and so I did watch this one, and as soon as I was done with it, I called up my development executive and said, "I want to do this."
Wow.
Was it based on an autistic person as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And did Freddie Heidmuller seek you out, or did you seek him out, or again, a British actor?
He had just finished doing Bates Motel, and both my network and my studio said, "Hey, we think Freddie Highmore would be great in this. Do you want to meet with him?" And I said, "Sure, I'd love to." And I met with him, and it was a great meeting. It was one of those meetings that goes to, it was clear that what he was responding to in this material was the same thing that I was responding to.
Great. So he didn't put himself on tape. He didn't have to.
No, he did not. No.
Yeah, and I think what she's asking, David, is, I mean, so many times actors just get sides. Yeah. They get 3 scenes, 2 scenes, and they're trying to decipher what you want from just 2 or 3 scenes. How do you react to that?
Yeah, that's it's a challenge. I think you're really paying a price in the Zoom age, and I'm not sure we're going to go back to that, but it used to be you would come in, you would read, you would give your interpretation, and then you'd be meeting with the director or producer who would say, "Can you try that again this way?" You don't really have that opportunity anymore. Funny thing about that, just since we were talking about House so much, and Hugh only had the sides, and he thought he was auditioning for the sidekick. It was not called House at that point.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Oh, I love that. That's humility. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. He thought American TV wasn't going to put that character at the center of the show. So, yeah, it's, I think you just have to do your best. I know that's a bit of a lame answer, but you have to go, what is the character thinking here? What is tearing the character apart in this scene, and then try and keep that subtle, but bring that across.
I mean, it is, I think you're right, Noel, in that it's very good for the actor objectively to understand the scene, to say, what's the purpose? What's my purpose in this scene? Because that's what David's going to want when you go in and read from. This character is taking the water from here to there. Great. So that's the purpose. She has to deliver something that's going to turn the scene or somehow. So that's the purpose. How she does it, that's going to be up to you. But very important to know that she does do that, whatever that thing is. Because that needs to be central. That's what we're looking for. And if you come in and ignore that, you do a great character who just doesn't deliver the pail, leaves the pail over there, or the water slops all over the floor. It's not going to be what we need. We need the water to go from here to here. How? That's what you add that's going to be brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And auditioning is different than actually in the role. I always talk about, Hugh used to talk about this, that, the one thing that sometimes, you don't want to get ahead of the story is also some, but this is less about auditioning and more about you can play the character, you can play the scene, you have to do both. Sometimes if a character gives you too much in a certain scene, it kills a later scene. You have to keep stuff bottled up. I'm getting, I guess, a little too specific.
No, yeah, it's good because there's natural curiosity that has to come with it. You have to get, every scene is a mystery. Every scene, there's the question and answer, and it leaves you with a question at the end of the scene if it's done right. And so if you give all the answers, even in subtext, if you give all the answers, there's no reason to go to the next one.
Yeah, well put. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you.
Again, my question is, how often when writing and building your characters, do you have specific people known to you in mind, and you say, oh, I really like this characteristic, this emotionality, this trait of my son or my best friend, and I'm going to use that as a basis to build these characters throughout your stories? Does that happen often?
A good question. I can tell you I don't have actors in mind when I'm writing. Others are different, but I don't have
just people known to you, though, people in your life.
There will be little moments that I will draw, but I don't think I've ever done a character who is just oh, this is Steve. There will be, oh, Steve does this little thing. I might throw that in there. I actually don't do that very often. I have no problem with doing that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm suddenly embarrassed that I don't do it more, but I don't do it that often.
Interesting. I think half the characters in Crash were inspired by people I knew. None of them did exactly what was in Crash, none of them. But some had a small moment. And one was the television director that, you know, and that's somebody, you know, you and I both know who I won't go into, and his crisis, which happened in a very different way. But I saw something in that moment and said, wow, that person could have just sold their soul to do that. Didn't, because, you know, but, it, you know, but then spun and spun and spun and spun. It stayed in the back of my head forever. So I think we get inspired by things around us.
Yeah, I think that's very true. That is, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Pablo.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Pablo.
David and Paul. I have a question regarding directors in general, and I was very curious about what you look in a director you want to hire for an episode of a show.
Good question, David. First of all, is it different, the director you're going to hire for the pilot and the series?
Yeah, very different. Very different. It's a very different job. They've got more time to do it, which is a benefit, but they're also creating something from nothing. The series,
they're helping you shape the characters and the style, everything.
Yeah, yeah. So in the series, you want a director who can come in and deliver what you've already done, bring their creativity to it, but there's a limit to that at that point in time. You don't want them recreating it. Just as with, you know, writers sometimes come in and go, I'm gonna do an episode that's way better than anything else they've done in the show. No, I'm not gonna think it's better.
Always remember the showrunner has an ego. Exactly.
No, but you know what I mean. You don't want them directing a different series. That just doesn't serve a purpose. Finding ways in and all that stuff you want. But the pilot director needs to create something from whole cloth to a great extent. And so you're looking for more experience, and you're looking for pilot directors, and you're looking, to be honest, you're looking for a director that'll excite the network. You know, you want somebody who's more likely to get a yes out of it. A series, I pride myself that I'm doing a network show. I've done network shows, and there's something, every now and then I watch other network shows.
You do great network shows. You just don't do network shows. Great.
Thank you. Because every now and again I watch other network shows and I go, that's not what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so I'm careful in that regard, because everything's just so spoon-fed on so much of network shows, and I don't want that. You know, they got if something's important in the scene, they'll do an insert of the damn thing, you know, and just, it can be there, and our character knows it, and that's what drives it. It's when Dr. Murphy noticed it, that's when we notice it, and we don't even need an insert then. We can be a half step behind. The audience can be a half step behind, should be a half step behind. The audience should be on the edge of the seat going, what's going on? What's he saying? Oh, wow. You know, instead of so much network show, it's just, this is what's happening. I'm telling you what's happening. I'm telling you what I'm thinking.
And I'm showing it to you at the same time. Exactly, yes. Yes.
And so I want a director with, in my opinion, a more sophisticated sensibility.
On that note, if I can ask a question, how writers, my single most difficult job as a showrunner was to find writers. And I say it was a very unsuccessful 20 years, whatever I did it for. I mean, you and Stephen Nathan were the two exceptions to that. And you came in with Bobby Moresco too. You, Stephen, Bobby Moresco. There were a few others. I mean, Patrick, a bunch of people on Easy Streets who were great, but the show never went away, and they got successful and ran away, and I couldn't hire them anymore. But it was so hard to find terrific writers who also were on the same page that I was on. So how do you do that? How do you find writers for your show?
I'm not good at it. I'm not good at it. I've almost thrown up my hands and I eventually, over 20 years myself, I have a stable of writers that I'm quite happy with. But boy, I mean, the network and oh, we got a great writer for you, and they come in and you work with them and they go, either they're not a great writer, or more likely they're not a great writer as I define it. You know, as the sensibility doesn't match. They may
they could be a great writer on their own show, but they're not writing yours. You just have to find someone who can write your show. It's very different than finding a writer who can write a great movie or a great play. They could write a great movie or a great play, and they should, because they have to be great writers. But they also have to be great writers so they can take a form and say, they can have to literally hop into your head.
Yes, right. Which is unfair, which is grossly unfair to us. But that is the job. Look, I rewrite everything. And that is my job. And so I've got good writers, but I rewrite everything. You know, some of them are just simple polishes, some are more radical. And if the script is, if I read the script and go, okay, I hate all this dialogue, but the structure is exactly right, I'm probably going to be okay.
Do you rewrite with them, or do you just rewrite it?
I learned that from you. I do what you did with that. I rewrite with them. In non-Zoom times, I have two monitors on my desk, one facing me and one facing away from me. And I will bring the writer of the episode in, and they'll sit on the other side of the table. There's two monitors, only one keyboard. And we just go through the script, and we make the changes as we go. And I'll go, oh, I think this is going a little slow in this scene. What can we do to lose? And they'll go, I don't know, it's not. We need this for this reason, or whatever they have to say. But it is, I don't have an answer. I've kind of given up. You don't know until they're in the room with you.
I think the rewrite process is so important, because I remember us on Due South, when we were rewriting Victoria's Secret. You know, you did a draft, we'd come back. We had to write under terrible pressure because the network wanted it at the last second, wanted to be a big two-parter, and we had and I was going to direct it, the first thing I'd ever directed in television, and no time to write, no time to prep. And you'd done some work, I'd done some work. I remember sitting in the room, and I said, sit there and watch. We had two screens, and I'd write, and you'd throw in ideas, and in that way, I was like, the writer is now can crawl into your head a little bit. And that's the whole idea. That writer has to crawl into the showrunner's head and say, that's what I did was cool, but it wasn't the purpose of the scene, and it wasn't the point of view that he or she wants. And I think that's very valuable when you can do that. You can do it. So
I think that's 100% right. It's so valuable for so many reasons. Also, another reason, just a very practical reason. So hopefully their next script, they'll have a better understanding of how you think and what you're looking for. But also, I send my writers to set with their episodes.
Yeah.
And if I've just taken their script and rewritten it, what really happens is the actor says, why are we saying this in this scene? And they'll go, because that's what Shore wanted, which is just not a good answer.
Which is what they say anyways, but they don't,
They have an opportunity this way of going, oh yeah, we talked about that. What Shore said, even what Shore said, or what we came up with is that this, and this. And so,
they can help because the actor has to be able to understand what you want, or they can't play it. You need someone there, and you can't be there. That was my big trouble on a lot of my shots. I was writing, so I was standing behind the director, or I was directing, but often standing behind the director on set. I was in the editing room. I was doing the scoring. I was laying in the footfalls, and there's only so many hours in a day, and we work most of those. So if you have to be able to empower people but that's a very smart thing to send them there, having known what it is. One of my big struggles, especially, well, first of all, living in New York, I sort of bailed on Hollywood, and living here, one of my hardest things is when I'm collaborating with Alyssa or somebody else, and you can't be across the room from them when you're rewriting. You have to take what they've done and go, okay, it's very difficult. But when we have been able to do that on Zoom or Skype or whatever, it's really, really helpful, because they're going to throw in ideas that you didn't think of. Just like you said, your writer will throw that idea and go, oh, okay, that's why that line's important. Oh, okay, because I was just going to throw it out. And because I had my own idea. And you're right, we need that line. Interesting. Let's go for one more question.
I just had,
okay,
there was one writer in particular who I would do this process with, and they'd go, no, you need that line because this scene has to do X. And I went, oh, you're right. This scene does have to do X. You're absolutely right. You realize your version of it didn't.
You're as cruel as I am. I like that. Exactly. It's like one of my favorite directions on The Facts of Life. Just do that, but only approximate a human being. Yes. Yes, terrible. That's why it didn't last that long. One more question.
Here. Hi, how are you? Thank you so much, both Paul and David, for this. My question is about receiving notes. Have you ever felt that receiving notes have confused you anyway to the point where it's put you off of the idea, or any advice on receiving notes that you can share? Really, I mean,
David, you go for it.
My opinion on notes, I will summarize. They will call you up and they will say, this isn't working, do this. The first half of that sentence is almost always right, and the second half of that sentence is almost always wrong. It is easy to get, I think of the note giver not as executives, but as the audience. If they're not getting what you wanted them to get, that's not their fault, that's your fault. And I mean, if it's one person and 800 people do get it, then that's fine. But if you've got people going, I was confused, or I wasn't laughing, or I wasn't crying, whatever it was you wanted, I don't want constructive notes. If this didn't work, tell me, and then I will work on finding a solution. I pride myself on being pretty good at avoiding the second half of that, because it is sometimes really tempting when they give you a good note and something isn't working to just rip everything apart. And the job of a good showrunner, a good writer, period, is to figure out what is the root problem there that they are getting at, and how can I efficiently fix it? And often it's a situation where if I just do this in this scene 2 scenes earlier, everything works fine in this scene. And it's figuring out, it's having the confidence in your initial structure and what you wanted to do, and knowing what you wanted to do, and knowing better than they do what you wanted to do. And so how this note is either irrelevant to what you want to do, or is something you need to address in order to achieve what you want to do, is the job.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most difficult things we do, David, is take notes. And at the beginning of my career, I was very, very bad at it. I was almost as bad as you were. Because your pride comes into it. No, it's much worse than
that. No, it's true. It's true.
Your pride comes into it. And when somebody criticizes something, we can criticize it. Another writer can criticize it. But, an executive, please. Okay, you're the head of the network or whatever, but please. Anyways, so early on, I learned, remember, I was doing a comedy series that I'd done, a pilot way back when for MTM, and the head of the studio came in and said, Paul, we have a problem. I said, well, what's wrong? I said, the head of the network, he's afraid of you. I went, he's the head of the network. I'm a little guy. This is my first TV series. And he's just afraid of you. He said, because whenever he gives you a note, you're smart, which is debatable. You're smart, you're quick, and you'll immediately give him the reason why you can't do that. And then he'll agree, and he'll go to the next one, he'll give you a note, and you'll go, okay, this is why we can't do that. Da, 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 da. He's feeling like you don't listen to him. No, you're really smart, but I went, wow. So I went away and I learned from that. And what I learned was this, and it's something I do all the time, is when someone gives me a note, someone who is, and I think this is the stupidest note I have ever heard. What I almost always do is say, interesting, let me think about that.
Yeah.
And I go, fine. And then they'll give me 3 or 4 of those and I'll go, no, I don't do it all the time, but if there's something, and it's something I just do not, just dumb. It's just a dumb note. So I'll write them down and I will think about it. I mean, I'll say to myself that I'll never think about it, but overnight I'll think about it. This is in a movie or something that's longer from. And I'll call them back the next day. And by then, two things will have happened. One, I will have been able to formulate why it doesn't work. Or I'll have really thought about it and is doing exactly what David said, is that there's something not working in that scene. It's not what they're saying, but it could be this. And I'll come up with a solution. Or sometimes I'll just do exactly what they said because my pride was in the way. My ego was in the way. I would give it myself a day to think about it. I'll call them back. And even if I called them back and said, here's the thing. I can't do this. I'm not going to do that. And no, that's the stupidest idea of all time. You know, even if I say those things, they say, thank you so much for giving it serious thought. They're so grateful that you gave it serious thought. But you have to, the trick is you have to actually give it serious thought. You don't have to think at the time that you're going to do that. You can think, it's the stupidest note ever, I'm never going to think about this. But just in taking the day, or taking the 2 days, or 3 days, whatever, or an hour, anything that's a show, just not immediately giving a knee-jerk no, makes them feel that they're part of the process, and they have to be because they're the buyer or there's somebody else. And that's the same way, even if they're not the buyer, even if it's just somebody, even if it's your aunt who's giving you this note and you're reading it, take the note. Too often, since sometimes I do throw things out, there have been situations where I've thrown out huge portions of a script and rewritten because the note was really good. I just didn't know it was really good at the moment. I went, wow. And it made it so much richer. When dealing with HBO, when I was doing something last year before with HBO, and they gave me a note, and I had some really good executives, and the notes they gave me, like, oh my God, can you just do everything? Can you, and no, they're not at HBO anymore, but the notes were so insightful, so well thought out. And almost always they were what David said. They pointed out a problem. They didn't give you the solution. But I am guilty of this as well. We all are. I want to help you fix your script. If I ever read your script, which I will never do because I don't read my friend's scripts, because I'm a very slow reader. If I read your script, that's a day I'm not writing because I give it thought, etc. So I'm not reading anybody's script. But if I ever did, my instinct is always to give you a fix. I do this with my son when I'm reading his stuff. I try to give him a fix. I know it's a wrong thing to do, but we want to help. So what you have to be strong enough to do is say, okay, that could work. Sometimes I do take that note exactly as it is. I go, oh, that's a great idea. I'll put a mustache on him. That does everything. Thank you so much. And that's after I've thought about it for a day. I'm thinking that mustaches are the worst thing in the world. And now I realize, no, mustaches are brilliant. It's exactly what points out a villain. And so I put the mustache on the villain, and it's no one's ever going to expect us to do that because we don't do it anymore. Sometimes it's exactly what you need is the mustache on the villain. And sometimes they need a top hat. And you just have to say, yeah, I know there's something wrong here. But I'm not going to do the mustache. I'm going to do the top hat. No one suspects a top hat in a villain. So take the time and really take the note in, even when you know they're wrong. Have the humility to know that you're not perfect, but also be brave enough, as David has said, and it's very cool, is to stick with your idea. If you believe it, it's not your job to be popular. It's not your job to agree with everybody. It's your job to deliver a really good story. And some people just can't see that. And they can't see it until it's on the screen. Then they go, that's a really good story. Or my father, when David knew, would read every script that I said, and he would just hate. He hated everything. Everything I ever did. And I'd always have him on the set. And I remember he was on the set of Crash, my first movie. Right? I'm with big movie stars. I'm a nobody TV director. I'm sitting there, and the stars that come on the set, I introduced my father. I remember him saying to Don Cheadle, he said, hey, nice to meet you. You know, this movie shouldn't be called Crash. It should be called Trash. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for your opinion. And I remember on the next 3 days, he read it, he saw a scene, and he just thought it was the stupidest thing ever. Why would somebody jump onto a subway track and chase the train? It's just stupid. And so my sister was an editor, and he's sitting there and he's telling my sister, it's the stupidest thing of all time. It's ridiculous. And so as he's leaving after visiting for a week, he said, Paul, here's my best advice to you. Just get through this one as quickly as possible and on to the next one. And then he would see the thing all cut together and go, well, it's the best movie of all time. I go, Dad, you hated it. No, I didn't. I hated this and this and this. Crash, he thought there was too much cursing. Same with, oh, there's too much cursing. And then you see it and you go, no, it's great. It's exactly as is. I said, you changed it. I said, I didn't change a word, Dad. No, yes, you did. But you just couldn't see it. And so a lot of people are like that. They cannot see what's on the page. Not until you show it to them, because they can't understand the subtext. They can't understand the context. So you have to have patience. You have to believe that you're the person to deliver that. And yet have the humility to realize you maybe didn't get it right. It's a tough balance. I'm going to end there. David, is there anything you want to say before we finish up?
I'm not adding to that. That was great.
Yes. My dad's brilliant. Yeah, anyways, thank you so much, David, for your time. I truly appreciate it. And thank you for continuing to doing great work. I want to do this again, if you wouldn't mind, because we didn't get, I had a whole list of questions. We only got to the first third. So if sometime you're free, I'd love to do it again and talk about other things, talk about the Good Doctor, talk about many other parts of your career and your process. I love talking about your process. It was great. I learned so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you. I've learned so much from you. So.
Yeah. All right, we're out of here, guys. Thank you all for joining us. And Feta, do you want to finish up?
Sure, yeah. Thank you all so much. And for all the updates, you can go and visit our website at any time. And if you have any questions, you can write me at any time.